Hello, friends. Good evening, and welcome to another session with me, Varun, on Prevatech. And in this session, we would be going forward with the topic that is part two of visualization. And in this video, we would be looking at some more leftover plots and stats that we had to discuss from the previous video. So I hope you have practiced what was taught to you till then. I have removed everything that was there in the console for us to keep it very easy and less confusing. But I have retained this graph so that you might remember that this is where we stopped in the last session, and this is a good jump hist, right, which has the column or the feature as online security. Okay, so now what we'll do is now let us move on to Jom bar. And what I'm doing is I'm adding a Jom bar for my partner. And in order to do that, the code is bound not to change. So I would be using my ggplot and my data would be customer churn and aesthetic would be partner only. So now I would just execute this line and let us see what would happen. Okay. So here, whenever you see a red line, it is the time taken for execution. You would be having a red color mark here beside this clean or beside this broomstick, and whenever you have it, it is asking you to wait. So now I can see that I have these many partners who are not. I have these many people in partner access who are not partners, and almost around 3,800 people are partners. All right, so this is how we classify, or this is how we understand these plots. Now what I'm doing is, on my X partner, I'm filling it with a different color. I mean, my Jom bar would now get filled with this aquamarine color. And in the next step, I would be adding, or I would be taking this one more step forward. And what we are doing here is I'm adding a color black, and the fill would be aquamarine 3. Now let us see what would happen because of this. Because of this, I would be having borders on my no and yes, and these borders would be black in color. Now let us go to the next line, wherein I'm using my X to be partner and fill also would be partner. And now let us see what would happen in such cases. Okay, so here when you do this, both these colors would be taking in, both these dimensions would be taking in two different colors automatically. And here red is for a no, while blue is for a yes. But then what would happen if we fill it with an other parameter all together? So here we can say that there are around, so here the count would, so here you can see blue represents there are no internet service. Okay. So 2,000 people who are not partners, I mean from 1,000 to 2,200, 2,300, who are not partners have fiber optic, and also there are around 2000 500 to 3,500 people who have DSL and who are not partners. The same is with people who are partners as well. And here we can deduce that there are almost around 800 people who are partners and who are not partners also, who do not have internet connection. So EDA basically helps us in coming up with a lot of assumptions and lot of conclusions just from a very small pictographic representation. All right, now that is the reason why in most of the cases we would prefer using graphs and plots instead of anything else. Okay, so now here what are we doing, guys? I'm using my X to be partner, I'm using my fill to be internet service, and I'm just changing the position. So the position is now changed to dodge, because of which we can see that all these are now standing in vertical columns. All right, so this is how we work on Jom bar. All right, so I hope you've been able to understand till Jom bar. Now that we have understood how to work on Jom bar and how to work on Jom hist, let us now move on to the next one, which is Jom point. Now, as a drill, I would want you people to understand how to work on jump point and also what is jump point even before we could probably start with it. All right. So how do you do that? I would now be using ggplot and I would be using my data of customer churn, and it has removed all the 11 rows which contains missing values. So you can see that this is a scatter plot. Okay. Here you have, okay, in order to make it a bit more clear, let us just zoom it and you can see that you have dots. Have you noticed these small things that you see here? They are all the small scatter points that have been plotted on the graph. Okay. So now here, what is the thing that I'm taking? I am taking X to be my tenure and Y to be my total charges. And I'm just giving a layer that is jump point. Now guys, how do you think all these are happening? These are all happening because we have these are all happening because we have the layer which is ggplot, and on top we have what is it that we have jump point. So ggplot and jump point together make it happen, right? So now let us move on to the next one, which is ggplot. Data would be customer churn as usual. The aesthetic would be total charges and tenure. Okay, the same as above, but then what is the difference? I am now changing the color. Okay, and here the color is slate blue, and when I do this and I hit and enter, you can now see that the color would be changing. Okay, and this is how you do it. Now we are going on to the next line, which is the same piece of code: total charges, tenure, and the color is partner, and the jump point. Okay, and the jump point, okay, so now here we'll just see what would happen when I do this. So what is the only addition? I'm saying that I want total charges, I want X, and I want partner. Okay, when I have these three, you can see that uh, you know here, okay, let us just zoom this. You have red as no and blue as yes. So you can see that all those people, how the tenure, their total charges, and their partnership is split here in this graph. All right. So it's as simple and as easy as what you are seeing here. So now that is set and done. I would now go on to the next thing. That is, I would use the same code. Total charges X would be my tenure, and then color would be partner, but then we are now changing the shape, and the shape would be internet service. Now what would happen when we do that? We are now adding just another column or another vector to see how things would react. So now I have two things, or I have tenure, I have total charges, I have internet service, and I have partner, all of them mapped only on one graph. And here you can see internet service, round, triangle, and a square represent different internet service kinds, and the partner is a no for red and yes for blue. So this is how it is split up, guys. Okay, then in the next step, what are we doing? We are now again changing this, and here it's a very simple addition, and I'm just trying to show you how different shapes would work. So now let us go on to implement the second shape. This is my second shape. Then we have the third. Okay, so now it must not be understood when we look at it from here, so let us just zoom this. So here, if you can see, I have cross on my third one. Okay, now this is my second variant, and in my second variant I have triangles. Now let's go to first variant and check out. And in my first variant I have circles, I suppose. Yes, I have circles. Okay, so this is how you can check for different shapes and size. This is my shape 4, and in my shape 4 I have cross again. So shape 3 was a plus and shape 4 is a cross. So now I'm doing my last piece of code in my ggplot for jump point, and here I'm just using a new thing, something called as jump smooth. Okay, now what would okay, and where did I add it? I added it here at the end. Okay, now for all those of you who don't know what is jump smooth, you should come here and check it out. GEOM jom, and we were working on jom underscore smooth. Here it goes. You can hit an enter, and it means that it aids the eye in seeing the pattern in the presence of over plotting. So this would basically give us a non-standard geometrical line, so that we understand how most of the data is passing through. So now when you go to your plots and when you hit the zoom button, we can see the exact, or the use of John Smooth. So this is the trend, or this is how your the most of your data is actually going into. So this is where it would be useful for us to understand things. Okay, so now if you can just maximize this a bit more, you can see it more clearly. All right. So this is the use of jump smooth. So now let's go on to the next one, that is a box plot. Now, what is a box plot used for? If any of you can just take a minute and think about it, well, now let us just implement. This is what is a box plot means. Okay. Now when we talk of a box plot here, what is it that I'm doing? I am reading the data, which is my customer churn data set that has no variation. My Y is monthly charges. Okay. And my X is internet service. All right, this is my internet service. I mean, the X graph is my internet service, and I'm adding jom box plot. Okay, now when we talk about a box plot, a box plot is very informative and also pretty easy to understand. Now, I am basically hoping that you people must be knowing what a box plot is. But if you don't know, let us just talk about it for a second. So here, this line that you're seeing, the dark black line, is the median. Okay, anything on top of it represents the quartile 1, and this represents the quartile 3, that is the 25% and the 75th percent quartile, while this is called as the interquartile range. And this that you see on the top is the maximum, while this is the minimum. This is how you this is how you label a box plot. Okay, so in order to start with, it begins with minimum, first quartile, the median, third quartile, and the maximum. Okay, now why do we need a box plot? Okay, now why is it necessary? Box plot becomes very important when you would want to measure the central tendency of your data set. Okay, now a box plot is a graph which gives you a great indication about how values in your data are spread out. Okay, although it may seem primitive in comparison to a histogram or a density plot, they have the advantage of taking less space, because of which when you compare distributions, it would be really pretty cool to understand things. Okay, so that is what or this is the place where we would generally be using a box plot. All right, so here now the next one is monthly charges and internet service, and I would now want to change the color to orange, and here it goes. In the next step, we have outliers, right? Now, what is an outlier, guys? Outlier is another part of box plot, which somehow we've not been able to see in these two, but you have an outlier here. Now, what is an outlier? Outlier is generally that piece of information which is way away from your data. Now, let us assume a small example, that is whenever we wherein we see the Indian cricket team. Okay, now when you see that there is an Indian cricket team that is batting. Okay, and when it is batting, for let us assume that we have 10 players. Okay, each of the player has a score of somewhere around 20 to 40, but one player is making a score of 100 or 120 or 110. He scored a century. Now when you compare this player's score to all other players, you can see that he's almost at least 2.5 to 5 times above their scores. Correct. Now in this case, this would be called as an outlier. Now, why is outlier dangerous? An outlier is dangerous because it very highly disrupts, or it very highly changes the information or the tendency of your data. For example, if you calculate the mean of 9 players who have scored 20 to 30, let us say the average is 40. But then now when I calculate, when I also take the mean into consideration, the average is now increasing with 7, increasing to 70, only because of one player's score. Now this is not the actual value, because this is just an outlier. Okay, so that is the reason why whenever we are working with any kind of a data set, we always try to ensure that we generally try to ensure that we treat the outliers before we work on it. All right, so then I have my last line. Let us just check it out what it does for me. Okay guys, now I would want you people to guess the guess the code of line, looking at what is the looking at what is the input. Okay, so here you see that you have monthly charges, and you also see that you have internet service. Correct. Now that you have both of these, why, or where do we have gender, or how do you think gender is getting populated? Now I would want you to take a second for it. Okay, and tell me, or probably tell to yourselves how, or what is it that we would be having in the piece of code here. All right, friends. So now I assume that you must have written down the code to check if you are right or wrong. So now I have my Y, which is monthly charges, and I have my X, which is internet service. Okay, and I'm using the property of fill, which is gender. And when I do that, it is populating the gender, and I have a job box plot that is coming up for me. Okay, so I hope you have understood what is box plot and how do we work on it. Okay, now we would be working on the next variant, which is called as a facet grid. Okay, now facet grids are very useful. I mean, they are very highly useful when or rather, talking about their use, let us talk about the approach first. So here the facet approach, it partitions a plot into a matrix of panels. All right, I hope it is understood. It forms a matrix of panels which are defined by row and column. It is very useful when you have two discrete variables and all combinations of variables exist within this data only. And notwithstanding facet grid, we have also something called as a facet wrap. Please don't get confused between both of them. Now this facet wrap, it acts as a ribbon of plots, and it arranges different panels into rows and columns. Okay, now when you want to use facet grid, you do not have to instantiate any separate library. The only thing that you'll have to do, or the only thing that you'll have to work is, you have to give this, which is called a facet grid. So now let us understand, let us go ahead and do this. Now why do we need a facet grid, or what is the use of facet grid in the first place? Now this might definitely be a query that you have. Now it is to see the distribution, or it is to see how good your data is being split into. So it would now completely break down your plot into small units, so it would kind of become very easy for you to understand or analyze the same graph which you're working on. So now let us see what I'm doing. Guys, this is a histogram that I'm creating with my X to be tenure and my fill to be internet service. The rest of the code, I'm sure you know. I'm using a ggplot and a JOM histogram, and I'm saving it into G1. Okay. Now what I am doing is within G1, I am now giving facet grid to my internet service. So here it goes facet grid to my internet service. And when I do it, here it goes. So here it's split up in it split up the DSL, fiber optic, and the no internet service into three different columns or into three different matrices. It's now split. All right. Then I'm using a ggplot which has customer churn in my data. The aesthetics, now if you look at it, you have Y as total charges and X as tenure. And I'm also taking color this time, which is my contract. So now, guys, if you can see, I'm now using more than two variables, and I'm using a jump point, and I'm also using a jump smooth, and I'm passing it to G2, and to G2 I'm adding a facet grid to contract. So here I have my contract, which is month to month offer, 1 year and 2 years. Now, if you want to understand facet grid, only only that matrix, only that row would be split up into matrices, the one which you enter within facet grid. So here I have contract, which is split up because I have entered contract in my facet grid. Earlier we saw internet service, which got split up here, and we have DSL, fiber optic, and no internet service because we have given facet grid to internet service. Likewise, now let us go to the next one wherein I'm using monthly charges for my Y. My X is payment method, all right, and I'm using fill for my internet service, but this time I'm using a box plot, okay, and I'm giving a facet grid to my internet service. And when I do that, you can see in the no is at the least. This dark color thing which you see here, this is the outlier, and we just discussed what an outlier is, so I'm pretty sure you all know what it is. Then we have something called as a theme layer. Now this is completely a cosmetic, guys. This is just to see how good your your graph can be made into. All right. Now, when we talk about the theme layer here, I would be using ggplot. Okay. Now, what is ggplot, guys? Ggplot is the same thing which we spoke about. Okay. The same library within ggplot2. Ggplot is a function within ggplot2. So here you have the data, which is customer churn, and the aesthetics wherein x is equal to tenure. Okay, now on top of this, I'm using a histogram, and I'm giving the histogram red color, or an aquamarine color, which is border, and red color which is within, and I'm saving this into my G4. Now let us just see what happens. And in my G4, okay, I would be adding labs. What is labs? Labs is nothing but label. All right, we don't have to do anything out of the box. Lab is just nothing but label. Okay, now in label I am giving distribution of tenure, and I'm saving it into G5. All right, guys. Now on my G5 I am now giving a panel background, and with that panel background I would be using element rect. Okay, and what does this element rect do? It would basically give me a shape. Okay, so now let me do that. Okay, and then on top of this I am again using an element rect. Okay, I mean this is on top of G6. All right, so now I am adding, and in my G7 I'm giving it an element text. Okay, and that text which I'm giving, which is the title, see, if you can see here, I have something called as plot title. And in my plot title, I'm giving it an edge just of 0.5. The face is bold and the color is peach puff. Okay, you can try this for different colors of your choice, guys. This is not at all a restriction. Okay, and finally, here I have my output. So now let us understand this line by line so that we see what is what. Okay, guys, so here we have two different colors, Okay, so let us start. So this is my title that goes, which is the title distribution of tenure. All right, and then I'm giving a panel background, olive drab. Okay, now this panel background would work here. Okay, on the count and tenure, and then I'm giving plot background, which is pale green. This one, which you're able to see within the checks, is my pale green. And then I'm giving my element text, that is, this one should have a size of 0.5. Its face should be bold, that is, it should be boldly written, and the color should be peach puff. Okay, and then I have my output. Likewise, let us now try for another plot. And here what I am doing is, now I am taking a ggplot of y as total charges, x as tenure, and color to be internet. And once I do that, I'm adding a label, that is a title of total charges versus tenure. X would be tenure and y would be total charges. Then I'm adding my theme layer, which would give me a panel background and a plot background. So I'm adding Thistle and Tomato colors, which are very close to each other. And finally, I'm giving my title a, a pattern for it to understand or follow. So here it goes, guys. Now we can just zoom this and see. This is my plot. All right, so here is my heading, total charges versus tenure, and these are the three lines that we just got. All right, so I hope it is understood to each and every one of you. And if it is not, and after you've practiced, if you still have any query, please feel free to write to us or to ask us. Now let us move on to the final part of the data visualization topic, that is the library Plotly. Okay. Now before we go into it, I would again want you to do the drill of pausing things for a second and probably tell me why do we use a Plotly, or you could probably write down, or you can think to yourself and see if you've been able to understand things correctly or not. Now whenever you're using Plotly, because this is the first or second time I'm again showing you how to install, you would just go into this. Okay, you would type it here, Plotly, and you would hit on install. Okay, once you do that, you would have a line that would come up automatically, that is, okay, install packages Plotly. It would do its job, and as long as you have a red line here or a red thing here, please don't go ahead. Okay, so now that it is done, now it is time for us to go ahead and search as to what is Plotly used for. Okay, so here you have, it creates interactive web graphics. Okay, now what do we mean by that? Let us just go ahead and check it right away. Okay, and the only difference is when you're using Plotly, the name of the function would now be plot underscore ly. All right, if you're using ggplot2, it would be ggplot. So the name of the libraries and the names of the names of the libraries and the names that we use here, they are they can be very easily interchanged or used. Okay, for example, ggplot2 is what we use for if you're using the library ggplot. Okay, it's as simple as that. All right, guys. Now, okay, let us just do this once again. I'm using my Plotly. All right. Well, Plotly seems to be a bit problematic. Anyways, so we'll talk about Plotly in the upcoming session. So I hope you have understood how to work till theme layer. All right. And I just would want, so all right, so I hope you all have understood how to work on theme layer, right? In the next session, we would be looking at some more topics, and we would be covering the ones which are left. So the agenda is covered. So here the agenda was to understand visualization and to look at some question and answers that are asked about in the interview. So if you have any queries, please feel free to write to us at hello@pravatech.com, or also you can call to us on 8147111254. Thanks a lot. This is me, Varun, your trainer, signing off.